Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. Her self-isolation days are like any other. She's up for a run and a dog walk, Leanne Hughes.
G'day everyone and welcome to the show. I'm your host Leanne Hughes and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Last week on the show I had Jocke van Dam and we were talking a lot about reframing questions and how you can use that to get some really great experiences and open up the conversation and get people thinking more creatively and more open about what they do in your workshops. This week, we're heading back to the US of A, and I am chatting to someone I met at the Gallup Clifton Strengths Conference in Omaha, Nebraska of last year. That was the beauty of travel, right? Like opening up your connections and networks and getting to meet wonderful people around the world. He's also a very helpful member and engaged member of the Flipchart community on Facebook. I'll give you details to join later. But he's always asking these really interesting questions and putting out cool polls and also providing feedback on the show. So I thought it was the right time to bring him on the show and hear more about his experiences with facilitation. So today's guest is Tony Brazelton, and he loves to design and deliver learning experiences to help people be excellent to each other. Now, Tony has a wild and crazy professional background. We love that on the show. He's been a biochemist, a manager of projects, a manager of people, a process improvement consultant, a change management consultant, and now a corporate trainer and management and leadership consultant. And guess what? He has held all of these roles at the same company. Now, there is a great selling point for joining a big company is for the opportunities that are available. In this episode, Tony and I talk about the gift that we give to each other and our participants and the gifts that we receive during our workshops and how we can respond to those. Now, that is a metaphor. We're not talking checks. We're not talking chocolate bars. We're talking about that metaphorically. We also talk about how we can reduce the barriers of online engagement. And I think that's a big thing in terms of our transition to delivering virtual workshops is how do we get that engagement happening? How do we get it not happening nice and early? He shares a really neat example of an icebreaker he created for the more scientific people that work at his company. I think there's often a misconception that anyone who steps up in front of a workshop room or on the stage is an extrovert. And we talk about this in the show. Tony is an introvert and he shares his strategies and guidance for fellow introverts who want to get more confident in being a facilitator, which you'll find useful. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, he shares how he gets centered and prepares before a workshop, the importance of listening, and of course, much, much more, which I can't sort of neatly wrap in a bow in this summary. You'll have to listen in. If you enjoyed this conversation, found it useful, found it inspiring, definitely reach out to Tony and myself. Let us know. The contact details for that are over in the show notes at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 122. Those are the numerals 122. Of course, once the conversation is over, you can join us. Tony's on there, the Flipchart Facebook group. It's a free resource with facilitators from all over the world sharing their best tips, their challenges, and asking questions as part of that forum as well. I hope you enjoy this one and look forward to chatting to you again next week. I am delighted to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Tony Brazelton. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And you either did your homework and you paid attention to how I have pronounced my own name in the past, or you just guessed really well, because most people say Brazelton. So good on you for getting that Brazelton out of there.
Thank you. I think that's the Australian accent coming in. I think the Brits and the Aussies will get it right, but it didn't even occur to me that it was Brazelton. I like how brazen is part of that kind of.
95% of the time it comes out of American mouths anyway as Brazelton.
Awesome. Well, you'll be at home if you ever come down under. Now, Tony, I've connected with you through the Flipchart listener. We met in Omaha last year. Gosh, that feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
For our listeners, though, can you please share a bit about your career journey, what you do now, how you discovered it, what you enjoy about it?
Sure. Yeah. I have not been doing this professionally. I've not been facilitating things professionally as a full-time gig for very long, only about 4 years, but I've been doing bits and pieces of that for much longer than that. My background is actually, I'm a scientist. I have a couple of degrees about chemistry and molecular neuroscience. And so my first job out of university was as a scientist doing research on Alzheimer's disease and brain inflammation. And I'm a scientist. That's part of who I am, and I will always love science. It just turned out that I didn't enjoy doing the work that a scientist does. I didn't enjoy the day-to-day work that it takes to collect that data before you can analyze it. I loved analyzing data. I loved drawing conclusions from complex sets of data, but how you get there, how you do all those experiments and the manual labor of it, I just discovered was not for me. And I was finding that I was spending more and more of my free time volunteering for different things, both inside my company and outside of my company. And what those things had in common were usually some connection with people, some sort of organizing or designing of an event or an experience. And so I started looking for opportunities to do that. Didn't land to training or facilitation right after that by any stretch. I had probably 3 or 4 different types of careers before I found my current role, doing things like project management, people management, process improvement, change management, consulting, and eventually learning and development. And that's where I am now. And all of those pivots were at the same company. So I'm very lucky that my company is large enough and has enough flexibility and career paths that I was able to try on a lot of different careers before I found what I believe I was born to do.
Wow, you are very lucky that you've had that opportunity to pivot internally. But also, I've got to say, how lucky are they to have someone in learning and development that actually understands the business? Because I was working in learning and development for a mining company. I had no idea about coal or diggers and, all of that stuff. And I think the value of someone coming in with that knowledge, they speak the language and it's just a matter of, crafting these experiences. So that's awesome.
It's a bit of built-in credibility that I find very helpful sometimes. If I'm going into a room full of senior leaders who are making important decisions every day, whether they're a group of scientist senior leaders or business senior leaders or a mix, having that background, being able to speak their language, both the technical scientific language and just being around the company for so long, being able to speak the language of the business, yeah, that definitely helps.
And in terms of your facilitation style, do you bring any elements of science into that?
I do, but probably mostly unconsciously. I'm an analytical introvert science nerd to the core. That's who I am. And most people who only see me in a facilitation setting would be shocked to know that I'm pretty far on the introvert side of that introvert-extrovert continuum. But I come alive when I'm in front of an audience, whether it's facilitating a training or workshop session or performing in some way. So that analytical part of me permeates every part of my process, from designing and developing new content to preparing for the event itself, to even in the moment, even facilitating, thinking about, let's say that we are in a workshop about, personality types, a few different personality type workshops that I facilitate. There's a lot of research and data that goes into all of those different personality assessments, whether it's Clifton Strengths or Standout or Myers-Briggs or DISC or what have you. Having that knowledge, having read some Carl Jung derivative paper 5 years ago and pulling that little nugget into that discussion, it comes naturally to me, and it can sometimes enrich the experience for the participants.
Yeah, I think it's really about relying on your strengths and bringing in that as your style as a facilitator. So on that, I think we need to co-facilitate, because I don't like the data or the research. I'll do it because I know people need it. But I think I need someone like you in the room that's like, okay, and then can quote all this research. It's definitely not one of my strengths. So it's great to hear that you've got that style. Now, can you please talk to the introverts that are listening to this? Because I often get people who are introverted that really want to do this as a career. They love being around people. They love learning. But they're really unsure about finding their feet and getting that confidence to be in front of people. What was your process for doing that? Did you have to sort of bust through some beliefs, or was it just time? What worked for you?
Yeah, I think it's very much connected to the last comment you just made, Leanne, about facilitator styles. When I first started facilitating, even before I taught my first class or facilitated my first workshop, I was paying very close attention to the trainers that were training me. So yeah, everyone has to find their own facilitation style. And for me, some facilitators that I was just wowed by I suspect they're more like you, Leanne. I don't know. I have experienced your facilitation at the Clifton Strength Summit last year, but I haven't experienced enough of them to know this about you. But I suspect that your facilitation style might be similar to some others that I've seen who I really admire and adore. I just can't do it, which is the content isn't that important. Yes, they may find some personal connection with the content, but they could facilitate anything. They could facilitate family discussion about where we're going to go for dinner tonight, right? And for me, no, that's draining for me. For me, the content, the ideas, the principles have to come first. And so that's the strength that I lean on, is my passion about whatever this idea or concept or principle or skill that I want to help people adopt or learn or practice. Whatever that is, that's what I get excited about. And even before I had any facilitation skills, I'm glad there are no recordings of my early facilitation days, because I would be horrified, because I was a terrible facilitator in terms of the skill of facilitation, in terms of listening to people. I was lecturing in, I think, probably an entertaining way. And I think people connected with me because I was so passionate about the content. And it's a good thing that I was. It's a good thing I had some strength to lean on, or else they would have kicked me out the door, long before I had more opportunities to do what I love to do. So I had to learn that skill of facilitation that did not come naturally to me. I had to learn how to pay attention, to just learn how to listen. Basically, everything that Julian Treasure has been preaching for so many years and has preached on your podcast twice are things that frankly didn't come as naturally. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that those listening behaviors did not come naturally to me. I've had to practice them. Now that I've learned that skill, it does come very naturally to me. And I get a little bit irritated now when I see someone not being listened to. It just gets under my skin, and I have to give that person a voice.
That's really interesting how you notice it now, because you've built it. It's on your radar. And so I'm the same as you. When I see someone delivering something and they're not responding, or you look around the room and people are really disengaged because it's not relevant perhaps, it kind of bugs me as well. I want to step in and do what Michael Bungay Senior says, and just my advice monster wants to come out, but I've got to put it away.
So to get back to your original question, for introverts who are thinking about getting into facilitation, if I have advice, take my advice with a grain of salt, but if I have some experience that I would like to share with someone, as I've reflected on my own career in facilitation, that's been the thing that I think helped me, was believing in, I have a facilitation style that's maybe different from others that I have seen. And I've tried to mimic others, and it was not genuine and fell flat. And once I centered my facilitation style on my strengths, in this case, my passion around the content, specifically around soft skills types of things, personal development, career development, coaching, communication skills, conflict resolution, things like that. That's always my center, and everything grows from there. So that's the advice I would give anyone who's an introvert thinking, I don't know if I can get up in front of people all the time, but if they're asking that question, they must be drawn to it for some reason. So find out what that reason is, what's drawing you to it, double down on that, and that will be the foundation that you can build everything else on and learn the skills that you need to learn to be successful.
Yeah, finding your own center, not basing your center on what you see from other people. Yeah, that's something I had to learn as well. I was the same as you. I was mimicking all these amazing people, and it created a lot of stress, and it wasn't fun, and it didn't feel authentic to me. So I'm sure that was what the participants felt as well. Let's talk a bit more about centering and how, in the context of preparing for a workshop. So as we know, a lot of facilitators on this show talk about their preparation, the week before, even the day before, or the night prior, to get themselves, as Tony Robbins would say, in state. So how do you sort of get in state? How do you center yourself before workshops?
It starts about 12 years before the event.
I hear you.
Right. And what I mean is I have to feel incredibly confident before I can be effective as a facilitator. If I'm struggling to come up with the words or know what's next in the flow of the workshop, if there's any doubt in my mind about what I'm there to do, what our main purpose is, and my main process for getting there, yes, I'm very open and flexible and adaptable to the needs of the moment. And that's probably what's been so addictive to me about facilitating, is the unpredictableness of it. It's just fresh and new every time. It's a connection to improv. I enjoy improv, and that's something that improv and facilitation are almost identical in, is that you just never know what gift someone could throw you in that moment that you can now it's a gift and you get to decide what you're going to do with it. So yeah, that preparation is key for me. If I don't feel prepared, I probably err towards over preparing. I know I prepare a lot more than most facilitators that I know, at least within my company, but I know other facilitators who I know prepare just as much as I do. But yeah, that's the key for me. That preparation is the thing. The energy I'm taking to just survive in the moment is palpable, I think, to the participants, right? I want to be the provider of that energy. And if I'm not overflowing already with energy, then the whole thing falls flat, and first impressions are important.
I saw one of my favorite business folk that I listened to his podcast, Pat Flynn. He did a talk on first impressions. And what he did was, it was so magic. I've watched the video. He walks onto the stage and he trips over. And like he rehearsed that fall. And he's like, first impressions matter. Like he's going to forget that type of entrance. I thought that was awesome. Yeah. I also want to go back to your comment on when people give you things in the moment, it's a gift. That's an interesting choice of word. Because sometimes I know when I've been facilitating and someone, I don't know if I'd call it a gift, but they might bring something up that could really change the tone in the room, or it could be quite defensive. Tell me about the word gift. Is that from improv, or is it just a way that you reframe it so it's a positive experience for you?
Yeah, it's definitely something that is talked about in improv quite a bit. That's not the first place I heard it. In improv, a gift is typically when your improv partner knows something about you or leads you to something great that they anticipate that you might be able to contribute to that scene. Maybe they just give you a little hint or a little nudge in that direction, and then you go. And so that's called a gift in improv. Really, anything could be a gift. It could be a word, it could be a gesture, anything at all. It could be a callback to a previous scene, anything. But that's not the first time I heard that term gift used in a more broad way. I think the first time I heard it was from Holly Dowling. Holly is a very gifted, inspirational speaker. She does a lot of work with women in leadership and women entrepreneurs. She's done a lot of pro bono work with the UN. And I first encountered her when she was the master trainer for a course that I was getting certified to teach in. That's where I first met her. And she wowed me. She was one of these facilitators who I think, could facilitate anything in any setting, any topic for any audience. And she, I think, almost says that word as like in almost like a religious sense. Everyone has a unique gift that they have to bring to this world, and everything that you encounter in the world is a gift, and you get to decide what to do with that gift. Just like a real gift that you might get on an occasion, like a birthday or Christmas or something, you might not know what to do with it, or it might be the most wonderful thing ever that you've been waiting for your whole life, or you might want to get rid of it right away. Whatever your reaction to that gift, whatever your perceived need for that gift is, what do you do when you receive that gift? You say thank you. You always say thank you. That's just really important for me to keep in mind all of the time. I was facilitating a workshop in Philadelphia back in January, and at the very end of a all-day workshop, and at the very, very end, I was making I was doing my landing. I was making my closing remarks. We had actually finished the last activity. We had some wrap up shares, and I was literally just verbally walking out the door, tying a bow on this workshop, and one of the participants raises his hand, and he says, "Can I ask a question about that data?" and this data was it was before lunch, right? And yeah, it was foundational data that we ended up building on later. But so anyway, basically he was telling me that he didn't agree with it. He had a scientific background and he didn't believe the data, and it ended up being foundational data that the rest of this workshop was built on. It was a strengths workshop. So it was about
all the Gallup data.
Yeah, it was some of the Gallup data. And that was a gift, right? That was something he's giving me. I did not want that gift in that moment, not at all. That was the perfect time to be receiving that particular gift. But I said, thank you. That is a wonderful observation. What I wanted to say, spoiler alert, I did not handle the situation as well as I would have liked. And I was really kicking myself afterwards.
Mm.
What I should have said after I thought about it later was, I think we need to wrap this up. Our time is up, but I would love to talk to you more about this data if you've got time to stay after. That's what I should have said. Continue to invite him in. What I said was, that would have been a great question to ask right before lunch. And I realized that was a horrible, insulting thing to say, because basically I just shoved that gift right back in his lap and said, I don't want your gift. And that's a terrible thing to do. And this just happened in January. So I'm still making mistakes with accepting gifts today, but that's what gifts mean to me in a facilitation setting. And just in a life setting. I mean, this is a helpful construct for me in a lot of different situations and just life in general.
I was just going to say, thank you. That was a gift that you shared with me and the listeners. I'm the same as you. I certainly have moments where, something just comes out and you're walking home that night or reflecting on it and think, I could have said that. It is a continuous improvement process. We need to keep reflecting and think, what would I have done in that situation? I love that. Yeah, that you didn't accept the gift that time, but it's a good analogy to how do we accept the gifts and what are we going to do with them? So thank you for sharing that. Now, Tony, you've been really busy during this time doing a lot of work online. And before we hopped on, hit record, we're just talking about our voices and how they're being stretched during this time. I know there's some seasonal things going on for you with a bit of pollen in the air. But how are you coping with all of this work online, speaking into a microphone, staring at a cold plastic screen? What's going on for you? I heard that this morning. I can't take that. I was on a call to a guy called Eric Solomon, and he's like, I like warm-hearted people, not cold plastic screens. And
that's funny.
Thought it was good.
It's interesting. There's the coping with this whole situation, and then there's the adapting that we're all making to whatever we do for a living, right? So for us facilitators, it's making that it's adapting to this situation and making that transition to more online workshops and online learning and online experiences. But just in terms of adapting in general, there's 3 other people who live with me in my house, right? There's my wife and my 2 kids. I have 2 kids in high school, and they're 15 and 18 years old. And we're all coping very differently. My wife, my daughter, and I are very introverted. We're quite comfortable staying at home a lot, and it's okay. And actually, as an introvert, when I'm facilitating online, even before COVID-19, when I was doing online facilitation, even though I preferred in-person facilitation, it's just more engaging. For the barriers to engagement are lower, although I'm learning how to lower those barriers online more and more every day. Even though I preferred face-to-face facilitation, there was something about that cold plastic screen that actually I liked, because it provides a little bit of protection against true judgment, right? I can imagine that the effect on the learner is maybe better than it is, right? And without that immediate feedback, it's both comforting that I'm not in a state of continuous failing and getting feedback how not to fail, but also it's very disconcerting because I'm not getting that feedback and I very well could be failing. So that's tough. I mentioned the 3 of us are introverts. My son is very, very, very extroverted. He's got to be on the far end of that continuum. So he's really struggling a lot, being isolated from his friends. He gets his energy from his connections with other people and his relationships to other people. So it's been really difficult for him. He's been really struggling. He's also a high school senior. He's graduating high school this year. And so all of those things that he was looking forward to, his senior year track season, he's an amazing athlete, all those things are gone. And so he's really struggling. And so one thing that I recognized very early on is that we are all coping with this in a very different way. Everyone has their own things that they're dealing with. And that was very clear at work too, when people were talking to me about how their work from home experience and just their either desire to connect with their colleagues more, or just their discomfort with the technology that we have to use to connect with our colleagues. And as I started thinking more and more about this, I I never planned to do this, but sometimes life just sends you in a direction and there's something so interesting about it. You just keep staying curious until you stop getting curious. And I never stopped getting curious about this topic. And this topic was, what is our emotional reaction to that cold plastic screen? What is our emotional reaction to being on camera? What is our emotional reaction to seeing or not seeing our teammates every day? And I sent out a survey. I sent a survey to a few hundred people who had taken one of my workshops recently and just asked them that question: what's on your mind about video calls? Just that question. And wow, the response was amazing. It was an anonymous survey, so people were safe to share whatever was on their mind. And boy, did they. I mean, they shared, I was in tears, some of the things. I'm actually choking up a little bit right now, just thinking about my experience of reading through all of these things that were just coming out of people in this anonymous survey. Everything from, I'm not comfortable sharing my background. I don't want people to see my house. I might be in a meeting with like a vice president of marketing for this product line, and he's got a beautiful chandelier in the background, and I've got a messy kitchen because this is the only space in my house where I can work. Everything from that to, I am falling apart inside because I can't see my teammates every day. People who are just craving that human connection, and just everything in between, just all of the whole spectrum of emotional reactions and feelings and thoughts and complaints and positive things too. And so I originally had planned to do a webinar where I was just going to share some tips and tricks and techniques for both participating in an online meeting and presenting in an online meeting. But it became very clear that was not the path that I should go down. I realized I needed to do what I love to do in workshops, which is create a space that makes people feel safe sharing and feel safe sharing their true selves. And so I just highlighted a bunch of I think I took probably 20 or so of these 200 survey responses, and I didn't have to say much. I just put those on the screen and highlighted them so that we could kind of have that experience to share, and we could see each other. We could see, for every person who doesn't like being on camera and feels like they're being almost intimidated to turn on that camera when they don't want to, there's someone who is really suffering because that's the only method of human connection they have. So I just wanted to create a space where we're seeing each other and seeing what everyone is dealing with. And so I created a video that had those things in it, and it kind of went crazy.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, it was very popular. It went viral as much as a video can go viral within our own sort of YouTube type ecosystem, the video sharing platform where I work. And so I invited people to join a Microsoft Teams playground. So the primary video call and video conferencing platform we use where I work is Microsoft Teams. Zoom is starting to happen more and more, but Microsoft Teams is the default platform. And so I called it Tony's Microsoft Teams Playground. And twice a day, every day, we'll be doing this for a week now, and I'm going to keep doing it at least until the first week of June. 8:15 in the morning and 4:15 in the afternoon. Just jump on a call with me for 45 minutes. And if there's a question you want to ask it. If there is a topic you want to bring up, bring it up. If there's something you want to try or experiment with, let's do that. And I've limited each session to 15 people per session so that everyone has a chance to get out of this session what they want. It's been so great. I've learned just as much from the people who've joined these sessions as they have learned from me, if not more. And every session is like another opportunity where people have a chance to see each other, how they're dealing with this difficult situation, and learn from each other. And it's just been, I get to start my day and end my day with online facilitation. So
that is the coolest thing, and sort of leans back into what you were saying at the beginning of this conversation, the importance of listening, because your original plan was I'll just do a webinar and we'll talk about the hacks of making videos look great. Then you put out this survey and dug deeper into what people actually were feeling and what they wanted, and now you've developed this. So how perfect. That's just, you're just building on that listening skill as you continue on. So congratulations. I think that's an awesome idea I think with the audience, we've got 50% of people that run their own businesses and 50% that work internally. what an awesome idea for anyone to start engaging with people. We do want to feel connected. And even for this conversation, I was like, okay, just making sure that video is okay. I assumed it would be because you created that video, but it's always good to check because I don't know what someone's emotional response is to that.
Yeah, I would be totally remiss if I left this out. I'm kicking myself for not saying this sooner and being quicker to this. I was inspired by you, Leanne. Your Go Live Before You Go Live sessions. I wasn't able to attend any of those, but I heard about them, the concept behind them. I know for a fact that was definitely an inspiration to me when I was thinking about how to address this need within my company, and that those Tony's Microsoft Teams Playground sessions were very much inspired by your Go Live Before You Go Live session. So thank you for that gift to our facilitator community.
You're very welcome. You just gave it a cooler name. I think Playground's way more exciting than Go Live Before You Go Live. But it's true, because I was thinking there's all these webinars on how to do it. It's like, why isn't anyone just getting people to play? Like, that's how we learn. It's why we do experiences and all that stuff in workshops. So, and like you said, not only do they benefit, I certainly benefited from it because I'm learning all their cool tricks with, switching things around. So thanks for that. And I'm so glad you're paying it forward, and hopefully other listeners will continue to do so as well. One thing I wanted to point out, you mentioned in face-to-face workshop, there's a low barrier of engagement because everyone's all there. Then you also quickly said that I'm working out ways to reduce the barrier of engagement online. What are some ways that you're able to do that?
So facilitating online is not new to me, but I'm doing a lot more of it these days. So for a few years now, I've been taking workshops that started out as face-to-face workshops and translating them into a virtual learning environment. And this is just because of demand, right? So there are a few different reasons. Sometimes we might have a team at our affiliate in India, and they don't have the budget to bring me there to facilitate a workshop. So there is that demand. There's also, I work in a large global corporation. Many of our teams are global in nature. They span many, many time zones and continents. So it's not feasible to bring everyone together into one place for a workshop. So there was another demand for more online learning and online workshops. So I had some experience translating some of these face-to-face workshops into a virtual learning experience. Today, it seems kind of silly, but for whatever reason, I never incorporated video. I mean, most of these were done over Skype, which has a video capability. I could have turned on my camera if I wanted. Other people could have turned on their camera if they wanted. But we never did. It just wasn't part of the culture. Today, that seems ridiculous. Why wouldn't we? Why would the facilitator turn on his camera? Okay. But that's the difference between this world that we live in now and the world that we lived in 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And so, some of those barriers to engagement were palpable right away. First of all, I'm not a natural facilitator, right? So I would like to believe I am an empathetic person, but it's not the thing that I lead with. I've been in the experience of some amazing facilitators who they instantly form a connection, not just with everyone in the room, but with each individual person in the room. And they just do it instantly through just, I don't know, something that comes out of their pores, a pheromone or something, or just, the way that they just the way they say hello to people when they come in the room. I don't have that. So I've had to learn other ways of connecting with people and creating a safe space for people to share and be who they really are. And a lot of that comes from my facial expressions, I do believe. I have really bad eyesight, actually. I'm wearing contacts right now. But even with my contacts in, I can't see very well because they don't make contacts that correct all of my vision. So in order to see perfectly clearly, I have to wear contacts plus glasses. This corrects the rest of my power and corrects my astigmatism. So I can see perfectly clearly now, but it hides some of my expressiveness. So one of the trade-offs that I make as a facilitator is a little bit of vision. Now, I can still see fine. It's just if I need to see something on a flip chart that someone has written across the room, I'll put my glasses on so I can see that. But in terms of like people's faces, it's not like I'm blind. I'm going to trip over things in the room or anything like that. But I do rely on my face to convey warmth, to convey welcoming, to convey concern, because I'm not that verbal of a person. I don't always have the words at my disposal in an instant. That's one of the things I like about improv, is that even though I'm not very good at improv, practicing improv helps me feel more comfortable with just saying whatever is on the tip of my tongue in that moment, even if the words aren't quite right. Something is better than nothing. But still, that's not what I lead with. So that was a barrier for me, is, okay, how do I create that safe space for people without them seeing my face? Now, today, they can see my face because I'm turning my camera on, and that barrier is a little bit lower now. But when I was using Skype, I was thinking, okay, how do I do that? And one thing I started doing was what I now know is called a ragged start. That's something I learned from the First Time Facilitator podcast. I think this was an early episode. Do you remember who shared the idea?
Catherine Lloyd and Andrew Wixon. I went to one of their workshops and they did it. I was like, this is the best idea ever. Because people are just trickling in, but we've got stuff to do.
Yeah, so their gift to me, so Catherine and Andrew, did I get that right, Catherine and Andrew? Yeah. Their gift to me was not that idea, but the name for that idea. I now know what to call it. And so in a face-to-face workshop, there might be a flip chart where we've got a prompt and, if you live to 95, what will you look back on and be satisfied with? Or those aren't the words that I put on the flip chart. I forget exactly how I say it, but that's an example of a ragged start. People can just start contributing to that flip chart as they filter in the room. And then small talk is a lot easier because I can look at what they've written on the flip chart and talk to them about that. Because as an introvert, small talk is really not my thing. There's got to be some substance to this conversation for me to feel authentic and engaged in the conversation. So talking about the weather or the commute or what they brought for lunch, I'm not going to come across as authentically interested in that. I'm terrible at small talk as an introvert. But this ragged start gives me something substantial to engage in some small talk with them about before we even start. And then I can start building rapport before, the bell rings, so to speak. So when I was doing Skype without camera, I would introduce a ragged start to those Skype meetings. As people were filtering in, I would have a slide displayed that has a prompt question. In the playground sessions, for example, this was sort of a silly thing. It wasn't really that connected to the content, which is a little bit out of character for me. Usually any energizer or icebreaker is very much connected to the content. But in the playground sessions, I'll have a slide up that says, can you guess what this molecule is? And in the video that they all watched, I was wearing this t-shirt that had a molecule on it.
Cool.
And so who can guess what this molecule is? Type your guess in the chat. So we can play around with that as people are filtering in. So doing things like that helps people start participating. And I believe the act of participating makes the environment feel more safe because you've participated and there's been no negative consequence, no judgment. So that's the expectation now that you have for whatever's to come. I'm not going to be judged. I can do a thing. I'm not going to be judged. Yeah, that was a pretty low stakes thing to maybe answer a trivia question. But anything that I can do like that at the beginning of a workshop to help people feel not judged and like if they participate, it's going to be okay. I try to do that as soon as possible.
Yes, me too. I've got very similar philosophy on doing that and getting engagement, getting people just active for the sort of same reason. They feel safe and they feel like, oh, right, that wasn't so bad. Like throw another question at me. So it does seem to work really well. One thing I want to point out to listeners that are just listening on the audio is that Tony's got a bit of a sign at the back. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you would have seen it the whole time. It just says, hello, First Time Facilitator podcast viewers, which is lovely. Just an extra touch. And I think that's what I want to sort of pull up about your facilitation style and the stories that you're sharing. Even that example with the molecule, something that you pre-recorded, you're going to extra effort. You're going above and beyond what is expected with that sign as a simple example. And that's what I sort of love to do as well as encourage facilitators. It's never crowded along the extra mile. It's always worth putting in one or two just extra touches to surprise and delight the people that are in your workshop groups, and you're demonstrating that, Tony. So well done.
I should mention, Leanne, about that molecule. I mentioned that it wasn't related to the Microsoft Teams Playground content. And I guess it wasn't directly, but actually it kind of was, because the answer to that trivia question, can you name this molecule? And most people couldn't. There weren't any, you'd have to be a scientist in a very narrow field to actually have identified the molecule just by its structure. And I'm a biochemist. I wouldn't have even recognized that molecule, but it had a blue t-shirt on in the video and it had a molecule on it. And one of the key themes in the video is about, how we all crave connection with each other. So the molecule was actually oxytocin, and oxytocin it's a hormone. It is the hormone of human connection and bonding. So yeah, it's never crowded on the extra mile. And that's my center as a facilitator is thinking about how deep and meaningful can we go within a concept or a principle or a skill that is meaningful without belaboring the topic. And so that's one example of being an analytical scientist who likes to facilitate workshops and training.
Yeah, geez, so cool. I feel like I need to do a science degree now. No, I'll lean on my strength, which is not the data. Anyway, Tony, it's been an absolute delight to hear more of your story on this podcast. You think you know people when you see them post on flip charts and you're in touch with them, but just to hear your story, your philosophy on running things, the way that you reflect on things that have happened and how you're constantly evolving as a facilitator as well is just an absolute joy. If any of our listeners would love to find out more about you, reach out to you, get some ideas, find out about the playground that you run, all of that, where can they find you?
LinkedIn. The only social media that I am remotely active on is actually two things now. Oh, yeah. Another gift you have given us is the Flip Chart Facebook group. I have never been active on any social media other than LinkedIn until you told me about the Flip Chart Facebook group. So you can find me there for sure. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Tony Brazelton, Brazelton. And I'm very selective on who I accept connections from on LinkedIn. But if you just say, hey, I heard you on First Time Facilitator podcast, or hey, I saw you on the Flip Chart Facebook group, I will most definitely accept. Most definitely.
It's great social proof, isn't it? Tony, thank you so much. And let's keep in touch. Let's keep sharing ideas on best way to facilitate these workshops. And I hope you regain your voice back. I mean, it's been great on this episode, but I hear you've been doing a lot of talking. So thanks again, Tony.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Liam.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.